So we're license to go out and for people to start streaming in, but it's really good to have you with us this evening on Bible Q&A, Dr. Brad Harrab. You can see the bio there. Dr. Brad Harrab holds a doctorate in anatomy and neurobiology. And from what we were just talking about before starting, maybe we want to kind of stay away from anatomy a little bit, maybe focus more on the neurobiology. He has authored or co-authored numerous books, articles, scientific publications in science journals, and has done mission work in 7 countries. Currently, Dr. Harrab serves as the executive director and co-founder of Focus Press. Are you getting an echo on the audio?
I am.
Okay. I'm not hearing it. We'll see if anybody in the live chat does that. But while we're waiting on, say it again. Did you hear me? Are you with me? Uh-oh, it looks like your camera's froze up. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, good.
Somebody's saying, "Did you hear me?" I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah, that was me, because you said you were hearing an echo.
Okay.
But it's okay now? Hey, Tanya. Tanya's joining us. And as you're coming into the live stream and we're waiting for the notifications to go out and be sure to hit that share button, the like and subscribe. We're talking with Brother Brad Harrab this evening, and I'm sure we're going to be covering some very interesting subjects. Let us know how the audio sounds to you.
Let me check, make sure you can hear me. I just took my earbuds out, see if that fixes the problem.
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Perfect. All right. So anyway, we were just talking about, all the world's problems and how to fix them all. And I guess we're done here.
Right. Right. Not quite. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe and share button, share it out with your friends, and get all of your social media contacts to join us for Bible Q&A tonight. Brother Brad Harrab is going to be responding to your live chat this evening.
So, Norm, one of the questions I did not ask you before we went on is where are you physically at right now in the world? What state are you in? Where are you at?
I'm in LaGrange, Georgia.
Okay. All right.
In my office at the church building for the Northside congregation in LaGrange, Georgia, meeting at 1101 Hogansville Road. So be sure to come visit us if you're in the area. Where are you?
I'm up in up I-65 or I-20. It'd be I-24 from you. I'm up in Franklin, Tennessee.
Franklin, Tennessee. That's a beautiful place. That's not far from Dunlap, right? In the Dunlap congregation.
Yeah, Dunlap Franklin is pretty close. Now Franklin itself has got about 30 different congregations.
Right. So, yeah. You're in an area where there's a congregation on every corner, right?
Yeah.
I say here sometimes that I couldn't throw a rock in LaGrange without hitting a Baptist church. It's like that with meeting places for the Church of Christ there in Franklin, isn't it?
It is.
Well, tell us about Focus Press. I've been following Focus Press for some time. Been a subscriber to Think Magazine for quite a while, and really enjoy the content you guys put out.
You've been following us back when you and I both had more hair, and it was
that's right.
So 15 years ago, we started a work here in the Nashville area. Basically, it is on cultural apologetics, trying to produce material that will strengthen Christian families, as well as reach out to people who are lost. And so I think, we would both agree that the majority of members in the church, they're spending 96% of their time outside the walls of the church building.
Right.
And so we formed this work to try to give them tools for that 96% of their time. There's a lot of good stuff that other people do for, inside the church building. We want to really connect with how do you do your daily walk?
Right. Think Magazine has some outstanding articles. I have, and I've been very careful to follow the guidelines in the magazine for sharing the articles in bulletins.
Hey,
but there's a lot of good bulletin material in there.
Anytime, consider this blanket permission for you. Anytime you want to put one in your bulletin.
I've really enjoyed Think Magazine for a long time. There's a lot of good stuff on a wide variety. It's not just I think probably most people, when they think about apologetics, they think about the scientific evidences in the different areas. I really like the term you used a little bit ago, cultural apologetics. I think that's a great term, because apologetics has to do with a lot more than just the scientific proofs.
Absolutely.
Christianity is a lifestyle, the most fruitful, productive, fulfilling lifestyle a person can live. And there's proof for that too.
And, one of the things that we're trying to do, that we if you look back in the church the last 20, 30 years, we've not been very good at getting out of the pew and living the life that you're talking about.
Right.
And bearing fruit. We're good at sitting in pews, and we're good at listening to a guy talk for 30 minutes, but actually engaging with our neighbors and our coworkers, handing them material that is visually appealing but still sound, hadn't been great at that in the past. And so we were trying really hard to kind of fill that niche where, if it's a magazine that is on something that your coworker's been talking about, or your neighbor is interested in, you would feel good. Hey, this looks, it doesn't look like it was done in the 1950s.
Right.
Professionally laid out. And hey, I want you to take this back to your house, read it, and let's talk about it over lunch sometime.
Right. Yeah. And not just the magazine, but you've put out a lot of books on a variety of subjects, and every one that I've seen is a very high quality publication. Really good stuff. You got a new book that I think I read earlier that it has just gone to the printers and will be coming out very soon.
Yeah. So right now my printer's really happy with me. We sent the latest issue of Think off one day. The very next day, we sent off a 400-page science textbook. And then the day after that, we sent off a new teen girls devotional book. So, he's really, really happy with me right now.
So the science textbook, it is I don't know the terminology, maybe a curriculum quality,
absolutely,
high school science textbook.
Absolutely.
What age level or grade level is it designed for?
So it's a biology textbook. And these days, most high school students taking biology either in the 9th or 10th grade. I'm telling folks it's leaning towards an AP textbook, but it's not there as far as it's very, very studious. It's going to get your kid really well prepared for the standardized testing. But at the same time, it's been professionally laid out in such a way that hopefully it's going to make it easy for your kids to understand. I am going to, since you mentioned it, I am going to throw this out there, Norm. The difference between that textbook and every other textbook I've read, seen, handled, got in my office, there are some other Christian academies, homeschool textbooks that are coming at things from a biblical worldview. But normally what they're doing, they're just tossing in a few verses here and there, and they'll have something against evolution. This textbook was actually designed to build the faith of the person that reads it.
That's great.
Which I've never seen in a science book. Normally it's the other way around. Normally science is what is leading them away from God, because of all the evolutionary attacks.
Right. Or pseudoscience would probably be the
Yes.
better way to say. And that's a good lead into some of the subjects we wanted to talk about tonight, because the science textbooks in the public schools now, they're all through and through, from the earliest grade level science textbooks to the most advanced level science textbooks. They're all presented from the evolutionary standpoint.
First grade, starting in first grade, and then it adds more and more. And people think, well, we'll just skip the evolutionary chapter of that book. You don't understand that it's literally
through and through.
The framework of that whole book is based on.
Right. It's through and through everything. Whether it's geology, biology, everything, oceanography, and doesn't matter what it is. It's all based in evolutionary theory. And I don't know if there's a different term for it, or what how the relationship is there, but evolution takes the billions of years, accepting a billions of year old universe. And so you see it in geology, where the geologic timetable makes up for the billions of years, and everything that is discovered is dated millions of years this and billions of years that. So it really isn't everything. And is all of that, I guess what I'm asking is the billions of years factored into all of the sciences, regardless of just about what it is, to support evolution?
It is currently the politically correct theory. And so everything has to support that politically correct theory.
Right.
If I publish a paper in, say, microbiology, that is a solid paper based on a good hypothesis, good data, good collection methods, write it up, submit it. If I'm coming at it from a creationist perspective, it's going to outright be rejected.
Right.
Even though it's a good paper, good science, everything is done. It has to feed that overall umbrella of the evolutionary theory.
I'm sure you saw that movie I don't know if it was not by Ben Stein. He was the host of it, I guess. Expelled. I think the full title, Expelled, no intelligent design allowed, or something to that effect. It's been several years ago, but so you're familiar with that, and how he showed in that movie just the complete blackballing of anybody that didn't wholeheartedly accept the evolutionary theory.
Yeah,
in higher education.
We interviewed them for Think when it was coming out, and got kind of some behind the scenes discussion of what was going on. There's several men right now, a couple of them that have advanced degrees, who are actually keeping chart of all of the teachers, professors, students, faculty, staff, anybody who are losing their job or getting blackballed, not getting tenure, all these different things that are happening because they will not tote the mantra of evolution.
Right.
And one of the guys' name's Jerry Bergman. He's keeping a running list, and he and I have had several conversations. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of teachers who have been either fired, have been demoted, not received tenure, not because they're a bad teacher, but because they will not promote this false theory.
Right. I remember several years ago, one of the counties here in Georgia put stickers on the inside cover of
Cobb County.
Cobb County,
Yeah.
right? And I believe it was a federal circuit court told them that they could not put that disclaimer in the textbook; they had to be removed.
Yeah.
And the disclaimer basically said that evolution is a theory, and this book presents the theory of evolution, but there are other alternatives. Didn't even say what the alternatives were, just that there are alternatives to the evolutionary theory, and they weren't allowed to put that.
That's so. I know some of your viewers get frustrated sometimes with what's going on in the political realm or what's going on maybe in social media, because it feels like you've got this big bully who won't allow the other side to have things heard.
Right.
That's exactly where evolution has been for 25 to 50 years. I mean, it's the big bully in the room that not only do you have to put it in your textbooks, you can't question it.
Right.
You can't point out the problems with it. I can't, I'm not supposed to in any way make ripples in their pond, because after all, that is the accepted theory.
So how much over the past, say, 10 years, how much has that changed with the growth in the intelligent design movement?
So intelligent design, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is growing, which is great. There's a lot of PhD to MD folks out there who are looking at the actual evidence, realizing you can't get here by chance. You cannot get ion gated channels, voltage gated channels, receptor transports, all the molecular motors, all the microscopic things that we're now uncovering.
Right.
You can't get that by chance.
Right.
And so we're seeing a growth in that area. The problem is kind of what we were just talking about, in that evolution is still the politically correct thing. You speak out against it, you're liable to lose your job. You're liable to not get tenured. And so there's this weird kind of we're in a weird transitional period where we know the momentum is coming this way towards more and more people saying, this didn't happen just by chance.
Right. But
we're still keeping it pretty quiet because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Right. So is it the intelligent design community is kind of staying on the down low, as you say, or are they still being actively suppressed, or both?
I think it's both. And the way I view it, the way I see it from where I'm sitting, it's like the little boy with his finger in the dam. They've propped up evolution, and now there are men like, and I'm sure you've read some of his stuff. Michael Behe was probably one of the first to really come out and say, hey, this is crazy. Right. Michael Behe is not a religious person. He's a biochemist.
Right.
So when he said that, all of a sudden this dam had a hole in it. They're having to plug it and say, don't listen to him. He's just a fundamentalist. And then somebody else comes out over here and says, but wait a second, this over here doesn't. And so you've got this little boy trying to put his finger in all these holes that keep popping up. And, I don't know when, I don't know how, but eventually I think the whole dam is going to give way because there's just not evidence to support
it. Sometimes I envision a future where people look back at this time and they say, kind of like we talk about the Dark Ages, how could they not have understood these things that are so clear to us now? Yeah. I pray we're getting to that point. When people will look back and they'll say, how could they make the argument for abortion that they're not living human beings? That's just beyond ignorant, and look back on a time like this as just a total atrocity in human history. I pray for that day. Same thing with evolution, that they will look back and say, how could they have ever thought that we just happened? Yeah. And Michael Behe is the one that really, I guess, popularized I don't know if he's the one that coined the term or not, of intelligent design rather than creationism. He used, unless I'm mistaken, he used the term intelligent design rather than creationism.
Yeah, Philip Johnson and Michael Behe are kind of the fathers of that era. Mm-hmm. The big difference with intelligent design, they don't take that last step of identifying who the designer is.
Right.
I consider myself a Christian who also believes in creation, or a creationist. And so by definition, I'm a guy who says, yeah, there's definitely intelligent design. And let me tell you who that designer is.
Right.
That's Jehovah God.
And that would be where the intelligent design community stops short. They don't want to tell you who the designer is, just Correct. That there is design.
Correct. Absolutely. This past weekend, I had the opportunity to talk to a bunch of guys who are addicted to various drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. Mm. And thankfully they're all in a rehab situation. But they had asked me to go on a microscopic level in the brain to show them what's actually happening with the reward circuit in their brain. Mm-hmm. And so I'm staring at guys of all belief systems. There were some Christians, there were some that definitely, by the time I walked them through what is happening, from this neuron going to this neuron and this particular portion of the brain, and it's releasing this particular neurotransmitter, and not just that, it's able to reuptake, and it knows how much it's releasing, and it's doing all this lightning fast. You could literally see the guys just kind of open up going, whoa.
Right.
They knew, the brain is complex, but when you start bringing it down on a level that is subcellular, that's when it's just like crazy. It's just absolutely no way it happened by chance.
Right. And I believe it was Behe that really popularized the irreducible complexity argument.
Absolutely.
So what is that? How do you define irreducible complexity?
So the easiest way for me to communicate it to your listeners is this. If I give you a working mousetrap, mm-hmm. You know what it is, you know what it does. As long as it's functioning properly, it works. If I gave you all of the parts, the individual parts, the spring, the hammer part, the base that everything's nailed down to, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good. You're not going to catch any mice with that.
Right.
And so Behe's point is evolution demands that you keep adding things on step by step over millions of years. But if you take that approach with a mousetrap, why would you ever have something that just starts out with a base, and then maybe after a million years you add a spring, or after a million years you add the latch, or you have to have all of the parts there working together simultaneously in order for that to be productive. Right. And so he showed it with the mousetrap, but then he actually took you to inside the human body and said, we have proteins that are made that are a whole lot more complex than this mousetrap. You got to have all the parts together to make it. There's no way you can't reduce this anymore without having everything, or else it just won't work.
Right. So there's no one part that you can take away, like your example of the mousetrap. You can't take the spring away and the rest of it function.
No.
So if if none of it works without all of the parts in place, then evolution doesn't work because one part gets added. And that's the survival of the fittest. Our theory, I guess, is as organisms evolve, they keep what improves their ability to survive, and they shed what doesn't contribute to their ability to survive.
Right.
And so, just having the hammer without the spring, there's no reason to keep the hammer because it doesn't work without the spring, right?
Right.
So irreducible complexity invalidates the whole survival of the fittest argument.
I'll give you another example. It's a little more maybe up to date given the COVID situation.
Mm-hmm.
So in the back of your pharynx, in the back of your throat, every human has mucus producing cells. You have to have the mucus. Basically, it's one of the ways God designed us to filter, to make everything work properly. But if you just had mucus alone and it did not move, it didn't do anything, you could understand pretty quickly there'd be a problem because you've got this cell that all it knows to do is produce this stuff.
Mm.
And so God also produced cells that basically, for lack of better terms, are almost like windshield wipers that line the back of the throat. And so what they do is they've got these flagella-like projectiles that will simply wash the back of your throat. It wipes off the old, allowing a new coat of mucus to then come in, catch stuff, not dry out. Obviously with COVID, with colds, things like that, you get an imbalance, things go crazy.
Mm.
But ask the question, which one evolved first, if evolution is true? Did you have mucus producing cells and you couldn't actually clear it? Or did you have these windshield wiper things in the back of your throat just sitting there waiting, going, man, I really wish there was mucus around so I could wipe it down,
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
That's right. I mean, there's so much about the human or, any living organism really, that can't function without everything in place at the same time.
Absolutely.
I know one of them that I've liked to use as an example, and you can tell me if it's a good example or not, is a woodpecker. How many generations of woodpeckers had to beat their brains out on trees before they developed the cushion?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
the shock absorber.
Think about how well designed that guy has to be able to do that.
Right. And everything in place at the same time. Yeah. So, how do evolutionists, and this is something I've been curious about since I read about irreducible complexity. How do evolutionists answer the irreducible complexity argument? Or, I know answer may not be the right way to put it. How do they explain it away and say, no, that's not a real thing?
So here's where they're left with. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, well, that spring from the mousetrap, it may serve a purpose by itself. Which you and I look at that and say that's the most ridiculous thing in the world.
Right.
Why would you just have the base of a mousetrap? Why would you go to the energy of evolving the base of a mousetrap without all the other parts if it's just going to sit there for millions of years?
Right.
But they are left to explain it in such a way that, well, maybe there was some kind of a purpose that we're just not aware of right now.
Right. So the same people that use vestigial organs as an argument for evolution well, maybe it already had its own purpose before in the same breath.
Correct. Yeah. So, it's one of those things. And here, if you really want to get one of them fired up, point out that, that sounds like that's a faith-based system.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. My goodness. They will lose their mind
But that's what it is. They
Oh,
just believe based on their worldview that this
absolutely.
must have had some function by itself, right?
Absolutely.
So it's absolutely faith based, 100%.
Had a study with a young man today who has walked away from the church, walked away from God, and I was trying to find out where he is, what he really believes, and he started talking about the Big Bang,
Mm.
and I said, so that's your faith-based system, and he looked at me sideways, and no, that's not faith. And I said, was anyone there
Mm.
to actually see it? Any evidence for it that's not based on a faith-based system? Boy, he got mad really quick, because to him, in his mind, Christians and Christianity is a faith-based system that is weak. And when I pointed out, wait, yours is also a faith-based system, but mine has more evidence.
Right.
Oh, it just really upset his whole worldview.
Right. And that's what a lot of people don't understand about Christianity, real Christianity, not, just made up Christianity, actual Christianity.
Yep.
That it's not this blind leap of faith that people think it is. It's not supposed to be. It never intended to be. But evolution is a blind leap of faith, right?
Absolutely.
Because when I make the statement that there is not one single actual piece of actual evidence for evolution, is that an accurate statement?
Yes, with the qualifier macroevolution.
Right.
So, microevolution, can I turn a breed of dogs into a different type of dog? Absolutely, all day long.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you can add a gazillion years. I don't care how many. It's still going to be a dog.
Still going to be dogs. Right. So that's the difference between microevolution, which I think is, most people probably understand it as adaptation, and macroevolution, which is molecules to man evolution, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's not a single piece of actual scientific evidence at all ever in existence for macroevolution.
You are correct.
There's a lot for microevolution, right? I mean, we see it all the time.
I'll give you an example. I was in New Zealand on a public seminar, and I had a guy who just was adamant. I mean, interrupting me very, very, lack of a better word, he was rude.
Mm-hmm.
And I did something I normally would never, ever do. I got to the question and answer part, and I actually handed him my microphone, which, you normally don't do that. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I said, I want you just to give 3 examples of evolution, give the evidence for it or the mechanisms for it.
Right.
Now, Norm, I know you preach, you speak publicly, so you know what silence is like.
Right. Yeah.
Pause, right? So, 10 seconds of silence when you're in a pulpit.
It's a long time.
Long time.
Right.
I let this guy go for like 30 seconds.
Mm.
And, finally I kind of baited him a little bit. And finally he busted out and he said, fruit flies, that's evidence for evolution. And I looked at him and I said, fruit flies, what do you mean? He said, well, we have wingless fruit flies now. And I said, okay, in order to create those, first off, you did have a designer of that experiment that made them, but we're going to not even worry about that. I said, how did you get the wingless fruit fly? What did you start with? And the entire audience spoke up. They were like, fruit flies, so this guy did not get that his one example that he could pull from was microevolution, something simply changing a little bit. You weren't making fruit flies into a fern or a rhinoceros. It was still a fruit fly.
Right.
It was the best thing he could give me, by the way.
Right. And which itself wasn't even a correct example.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've been a couple of times. Have been in public forums where I'll offer $1,000 for somebody to give me, 20 beneficial mutations. Because again, if you ask college students, how does this thing actually work? Eventually, you're going to hear the words millions of years and mutations.
right.
And so, if you can get them to stop and actually think and say, what beneficial mutations are you aware of? In offering $1,000, I'm talking about in colleges, I've offered it.
Right.
Most I've got is like 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those was, by the way, it was sickle cell. A guy was like, well, sickle cell, that's a beneficial thing because you don't get a malaria. And I was thinking, hey, I'll give that one to you.
Kind of a trade-off, though, isn't it? So there's an experiment, and I'm not recalling the name of it off the top of my head. That's the one example that you typically get is this experiment. It's Smith something or
Miller-Urey. It's actually
Miller-Urey. That's it. Yeah, Miller-Urey. And I've had people tell me about that when I've made that statement that there's not a single piece of evidence for molecules demand evolution. Not one. They've said, well, the Miller-Urey experiment produced amino acids in this thing, and I said, well, somebody purposely designed the atmosphere
right.
that experiment was conducted in. That wasn't just pure chance happening, and it didn't even happen the way that they try to explain it did.
So they artificially made an experiment, simulated lightning. What they don't ever tell people is those amino acids were produced in an environment of like 97% tar. Not a whole lot of life going to happen in 97% tar. Add to that, anybody who is intellectually honest in the science field today will tell you that experiment was totally bogus because it was conducted in the absence of oxygen. So the researchers purposefully took the oxygen out because they knew if there were amino acids produced that it would oxidize, the amino acids would go away, that there wouldn't be the product they wanted. So they artificially manipulated the experiment. Here's the sad part. One of the guys, so it was Miller and Urey, and I think it's Stanley Miller is the oldest, I think. Whoever was the younger of the two guys has continued trying to promote this thing because, their names are tied to it forever and ever. And so within the last 15 years, he's put out a new idea and said, okay, maybe the way we can get oxygen in this thing is if all of it was taking place in an environment of carbon monoxide. Okay, carbon monoxide is not real useful for life. If you don't believe me, drive your car into the garage, leave it running, roll down your window. Don't do that, obviously. But when you got to take the position that maybe carbon monoxide was how we can get oxygen into this thing. That's
so everything about the experiment was conjecture, right? They had to speculate that this was the primordial sludge environment, and then lightning hit it and produced the early single cell organisms that evolved into everything now.
Which, by the way, they did not get. They got 4 amino acids. They didn't ever get life. They didn't get a cell.
Right.
When you think about forming a bilipid membrane, all the organelles going inside, they didn't even come. That would be like me saying that, I'm pretty much, I play golf just like Tiger Woods because I play with a white ball.
Right.
You know,
Right.
really?
So, right. So you're playing on the same level he is because you use the same
Absolutely.
ball.
Just ask my friends, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Right. So, about that Miller-Urey, right? Am I saying that right? Miller-Urey experiment. You cover it there in your science textbook.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. In the textbook, I want my children, your children, I want people to know what the arguments are for and against things.
right.
Since that one is so well known, and it's basically in every biology textbook, both high school and college, I want them to be familiar with it. But then I also took the time to write out, here's all the problems with it. And this is why it absolutely failed and doesn't make any sense. And this is why also it doesn't really give any credence to the idea that we've created life.
Right.
I mean, the other thing, Norm, think about this. If it really worked, why aren't other scientists doing it today?
Mm-hmm.
That thing took place back in the 60s.
Right. And they're still citing it.
Yeah.
Without any reproduction.
Exactly.
So if I were to ask you, if I were to come to you and say, Brad, I'm not sure why I should accept the Bible as the guide, as why should I accept your claim that it is a supernatural book, that it is inspired by God? Just, maybe top 3 things that you would say to me.
So I think the approach that I would take is this. I would say, if we found 12 to 14,000 artifacts that have been dug out of the ground that directly support the people, places, or events in the Bible, would that give you more incentive to believe that this thing is real?
Mm-hmm.
We talk a little bit about archaeology,
right?
Which there's been about somewhere around 14,000 artifacts that have been dug up. Probably my favorite in the area that I teach on quite a bit would be scientific foreknowledge. Mm-hmm. Scientific accuracy of the Bible. So once we talk about, hey, there's all these things dug out of the ground that support this book. Oh, and by the way, let's look at some of the passages in the book that teach on things that we've just recently uncovered.
Right.
Things that could only be in that book if it were through the inspiration of God. And then the third thing, probably where I would really want to focus your mind, is the resurrection. Everything goes back to the resurrection. Why was the tomb empty?
Right.
I've had this discussion with lots of people, all kinds of beliefs, and their gut instinct is to say, well, the disciples stole him. I'm like, okay, do you know what the disciples went through? Right,
exactly.
In the coming after that, I was teaching this past Sunday. I was not aware of this. Bartholomew was flayed, like he was crucified. Before he died, they took out a flaying knife and they skinned this dude
alive.
And then they beheaded him. I don't think you would go through that.
No,
you knew that was a lie.
There's not much that you wouldn't confess to if you were being put to that. Right. So that's the Lord Liar Lunatic scenario, right? Where he has to be one of the three, right? Exactly. He is either the Lord that he claimed to be, or he was a liar, or he was a lunatic. Absolutely. And then, looking at the veracity of the different elements of the gospel, you can eliminate liar and lunatic because, like you said, nobody would suffer the things that they did to uphold a lie or to defend a madman, basically.
Yeah.
And so that only leaves the one option, that he actually was the Lord that he claimed to be.
Yeah. You look, your options are the apostles took him, the Romans took him, which that makes no sense. Why would they, if they had the body,
right?
Why wouldn't they produce it and show? Or let's say that, if the Jews took it, Jews going to sit there and go, hey, no, look, he's not the Messiah because here's his body. The only logical explanation is that the tomb was empty.
Right.
And then you can bring in extra biblical writers who talk about that to kind of validate and add some support.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of my favorite videos from you, is the historical Christ, and where you go through in the video and you show the actual historical, extra biblical, historical validation of somebody named Jesus in that place at that time, with people citing him as doing the things that the gospel records him doing. And it's an excellent video. Anybody watching, go to focuspress.org and get Brother Brad's video on the historicity of Christ. It's an excellent video. I got a question here. Chase Green, who was my guest a couple of weeks ago, is having a watch party with folks there in Marietta, Oklahoma. So that's great. Glad to have y'all watching this evening. And so Chase asked this, and I'm going to leave this completely in your capable hands. He said y'all, but I know what he meant was, can Brad comment on Christians' response to transgender and similar agendas? How can we protect our children from these agendas that are everywhere? How should or can we convert those who are involved? It's a great question.
It is a great question, and let me start with the last portion of it. They have souls, and
right.
So always keep that in mind, and not just do maybe what Christians 15, 20 years ago did and say, oh, they're weird, we got to alienate ourselves from them. No, there's a responsibility on our side to try and take the truth to everybody, and they definitely need it. And as far as what's our response to it, let me make sure that everybody listening understands that there is a difference between hermaphrodites and somebody who's transgender.
Right.
So if a baby is born that has both genitals or portions of both, we would call that, in medicine, we call that a hermaphrodite. It's very, very, very rare. And when I say rare, exceptionally rare. You can still look at the DNA of that baby, and I've actually counseled parents on this. You can still look at the DNA, and you're either going to see XX or XY, or in some cases it may be XXY. If there's a Y chromosome and the genitalia are enough there, then that, my counsel to those parents would be, let that child lead their life as a boy. We're not talking about that. Transgenderism is when somebody is born one way,
right,
chooses to be totally different. And so, Chase, to answer your question, what they're doing today, and I think this is very evil, they're trying to separate sex and gender. And they're saying, okay, yeah, everybody's born with a biological sex, but you can choose your gender. That's not biblical. It's not the way God intended it. When you take Genesis chapter 1 and you see that God made them male and female, so you've got biological sex, and then you go straight into Genesis chapter 2 and you see him talking about man and woman and their roles and bringing them together. God is using the same thing for males and man, and he's using the same thing, females for woman. So in the Bible's perspective, there's not a difference between sex and gender. It's a binary situation where male equals man, female equals woman. And so for us to say, okay, yeah, you can have a biological sex, but you get to choose your gender. First off, it's ludicrous. From a scientific perspective, it drives me crazy. We have all these people that are saying, "Oh, we have to listen to the science. We have to listen to the science." You know, COVID and mask and all this stuff. We gotta listen to the science. But then you turn to transgenderism, and it's like we're going to just flush the science down the toilet.
It's fluid, right? How do you respond to the idea of gender fluidity? And I know you as a biologist probably have a very definite answer to that.
So according to last time I checked, I think Facebook had, I think it's 58 different genders that you can select from.
Right. And they still have other. Even with 56, there's still an other.
I look at that and I think to myself, these people have lost their ever-loving mind. Now, here's the problem for Christians. With the new administration, they are going to force acceptance of that, which is very ironic if you stop and think about it, Norm. They want us to accept people who couldn't accept what God made them.
Right.
You know, somebody's born a man. He can't accept that, so he starts dressing as a female. He starts taking pills, having surgery to try to become a female because he couldn't accept who he was. But now that he's transgender, we're going to be forced to accept that. Right. It's like, that seems like a double standard.
And how does that work if it's the loving thing to do, right thing to do, moral thing to do, to accept his fluidity, to accept his gender or her gender identity, whatever they choose to make it, and we accept that, and then they change it? So should we say, well, no, wait, we accepted that you're this now, so you can't change.
Right.
Or do we accept the change too, or just, you know?
I mean, there are states now that are talking about fining people for not using the pronoun of choice.
Preferred pronouns, right?
And it's like, how often is that going to change? You know, today it's a she, tomorrow it's a he, the next day it's a shim, the next, it's, you know,
Z, right?
To me, it is personally a slap in the face of God, who created that person with a specific biological sex,
right,
/ gender. For me to call it something else other than what God created it. Mm-hmm. And so I personally, you know, I'm not going to play that game with them. I know Chase brought up a very important thing about protecting our children. Brother, let me tell you, that is a battle that Amen. It's ongoing now, but it's about to get exponentially worse.
Right.
I did a DVD, which never in my history would I've thought I would have had to cover the topic of transgenderism. But I did a DVD. And when I was doing the research for it, I thought, hey, it'd be nice to show if there are television shows or books or movies out there that are promoting this. I was blown away.
Right.
By how much is already out there.
We're being inundated with it. I mean, just totally saturated in it.
It's like I was going to show, like a logo from a TV show, because I thought surely there's 2 or 3 shows out there. Mm-hmm. There was well over 100 shows now that actively have some kind of a transgender character.
Theme, right.
The books, and I know you've probably seen where, in the past I'll show homosexuality books that are targeting toddlers and all.
Mhm.
Now they got the same thing, but with transgenderism. And
Right.
so it's kind of a toddler book of, hey, you can pick whatever you want to be. And it's very, 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 it's one of those things, Chase, where, I've got 4 children and I want them to be warriors for Christ. So I want them to be concerned about these people with their souls. But at
Right.
the same time, it's my job right now to protect them and to make sure that they don't fall into Satan's snares about all this mess.
Mhm.
And so I purposefully will filter stuff. I purposefully will, make sure that their eyes aren't coming across it unless it's for us to discuss as a family why this is ridiculous.
Mhm. Right. And I think that that's important for us to keep in mind is we talk about transgenderism and it's the in your face push that you must accept it, not just tolerate it, but participate in it,
Oh yeah.
right? I mean, I wonder how long it's going to be before to be in ministry as we are, you have to agree to perform same-sex weddings.
Oh, that
And if you don't, then you can't, be a preacher somewhere.
Norm, they don't want you to just accept it anymore.
Right.
We've gotten to the place now where you have to embrace and promote it.
Right.
Or else,
And
or
right. And the thing that gets me is the forced participation. Right. I mean, I've said this, and there's some things that you commented on that I want to come back to because I think it's important. But it's important that we treat everybody respectfully. We treat their cares and concerns respectfully, just like we know that our Father cares about us when we take our cares and concerns to Him. He doesn't just laugh us off and say we're ridiculous. He cares about that. Well, we should care about that, but at the same time, it's hard when we're being put in a situation of enforced participation, not just acceptance or tolerance, but actual participation, and it creates a mentality or maybe a response mechanism, or however you want to say it, where we respond to it maybe in a harsh or derogatory way.
Yeah.
But it's important that we understand that, like you said, these that they have souls just like everybody else, and we should try to reach them with the gospel.
Since I'm not currently in a pulpit and it's not Sunday, I'm going to go somewhere that I probably would not go from the pulpit. But I do want to say this: if you are the father of a young daughter, do whatever you have to do to protect that daughter, because I have seen on more than one occasion the damage that is done from sexual abuse early in life. And so if you allow your daughter to go into the Target bathroom by herself and some 53-year-old man identifying as a woman follows in after her and does something to her, the consequences of that are likely to affect not just that day, but literally the rest of her life into her marriage.
Right.
And so, my Chase, I know you personally. I know you got some beautiful kids. Protect them. Do not let them out of sight. Don't just think, well, they'll be okay. It's only a minute.
Amen.
If there's a situation where they can be messed with, you make sure that you are protecting them.
Right. And I think this, kind of goes along with what you had said and the term you used. And again, I'm going to start using it because I really like it. Cultural apologetics, right? We would approach people today differently than probably, 15, 20 years ago. people with tattoos and piercings and, things where, used to somebody walked in a church building, covered with tattoos or whatever, and everybody had this, automatic right or wrong.
Right.
It's just the way it was.
Yeah.
But now that is much more common and accepted in society and in our culture, and so we react to it a little differently, where I've known of problems in congregations where they didn't want a certain person leading singing because his hair was longer than they thought it ought to be.
Right.
Well, are those really salvation issues? I mean, are those really issues that we should be, saying, well, he's got visible tattoos. He shouldn't be, he shouldn't be serving on the table, or, he's, she's got the cartilage piercing. She shouldn't be, she, I almost said serving on the table. No, she shouldn't be serving. She shouldn't be serving on the table, but she shouldn't be teaching the Bible class, for example,
Right.
the children's class or whatever. Well, those are, I would say those are cultural things that, there is some cultural element to that, for tolerance or acceptance or what have you, that, those really aren't things that pertain to the spiritual well-being of a person.
And I think
So,
we allow that to distract us for several decades.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got lost in the weeds of, oh, that boy's got a T-shirt on. He's up there serving the Lord's Supper. We're going to have to, rather than, okay, you know what? That young man, he's obeyed Christ. What we really need to do is we need to make him a warrior. And if he's wearing a T-shirt today, we need to teach him and bless him and mentor him. Right. To where he understands what reverence is about and where he's going out and discipling other people.
Right.
Rather than just going, oh, he shouldn't be up there. We're going to take his name off the list.
Right.
In doing that, what we did was for several decades, we forgot to even evangelize the lost because we were nitpicking the saved.
Do you think sometimes we make things, or we try to equate things with someone's spirituality that we really shouldn't? Like, I know there's still, I would say, a large number of people, religious people, that believe having a tattoo, just the tattoo in and of itself, is a sinful thing, and they quote the verse about cutting the flesh, and which isn't not tattoos like we think of them today. But, that was an idolatrous practice that was being condemned. And so how should we approach things like that?
I think the majority of people that make those statements have either never read what first century Christians really looked and dressed like.
Right.
Or they are so looking for something, it's almost it makes them feel better because they don't have it. So I'm going to judge that person. I think our time would be a whole lot more better spent reaching the lost rather than picking out that little speck. I admit earlier in my walk, I was there. It was easy to kind of look at people and go, he's not wearing a tie. Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah,
right. And then I realized, ties were made by women to really make men uncomfortable. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's, it's a leash. That's what it is.
Right. As I've matured and tried to get more in line with what I feel like the Bible says and to walk with Christ, I realized that a lot of the little traditions and things that we used to put so much emphasis on has absolutely no meaning. And COVID, but one of the decent things that this stupid pandemic has actually pointed out, it forced a lot of the American Christians out of their church buildings. And all of a sudden they had to realize, some of that stuff that we nitpick about and we we just sit there and, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't all that important.
Right.
It also kind of brought to bear, how much money are we spending on our physical buildings versus taking the message out to the community?
Right.
And, there are a lot of congregations that they're big, they look nice, they got all this stuff.
Right.
But nobody in the community knows about them.
That's right.
So,
yeah, that's I agree that the focus has to be more outside the building than in the building, and that's one of the things I've been, I don't want to say kind of riding like a hobby horse or beating it to death or whatever, but I have been emphasizing it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Is that Christianity isn't just these 5 acts of worship and these 3 avenues of work, the evangelism and benevolence and edification, and those things are part of the pattern, and,
right.
and we have to do those things according to Scripture. We can't, I'm not trying to take away from the importance of doing those things the way the Bible says to do them, but there's a whole lot more to it. I mean, I've never really put a percentage on it, but the 5 acts of worship and the 3 avenues of the work of the church and the organization of the church, elders, deacons, members, and the role of the men and the role of the women in the church, and all these things. They're all important things.
Yep.
But that's maybe 20% of Christianity. Yeah. 80% is the life that we're living, the actual lifestyle that we're showing to the world.
And I like that word, life. To me, as Christians, one of the things that we're not doing is we're not spending our lives with each other the way I think the first century church did.
Right.
I think they were with each other all the time. I think they were involved in each other's lives so much that it was crazy. And I think 2 things have happened because of that. Number one, you're not going to have martyrs who are willing to die if all they do is clock in for an hour on Sunday.
Absolutely. And I know from looking at me, people may think that I answer the way I do for a different reason. But the reason I always say yes to a fellowship meal is because I like to be with Christians.
There you go.
It's not just because I like to eat. It's because I like being with Christians.
The second thing I would point out is church discipline, which is in the Bible, by the way.
Right.
Only works if your church family has created such an atmosphere that to remove somebody from that atmosphere hurts them deeply, and they want to get back into it.
You have to value that community for the prospect of losing that community to have any effectiveness. You have to value that community.
Absolutely.
If there's no value for the church community, then what do you care if they withdraw fellowship from you or not?
That's right.
And so I think that there are some aspects about the church and about being a Christian that unfortunately has gotten kind of downplayed. I understand the need to refute false teaching, denominationalism, things like that. I mean, it's very necessary to do that because I like what J.D. Tant, how he illustrated it when they asked him, why are you so hard or harsh toward denominationalism? And he said, well, the mind is like a chalkboard. And if the wrong answers have been written all over the chalkboard, you have to erase it before you can write the right answers. And so, there is a need for that. I spend a pretty good focus of this podcast targeting Catholicism or Calvinism or, things like that, because it is necessary. But, I think of it sometimes like, Jesus talked about the tithing mint, cumin, and anise, but you've left the weightier matters undone. He didn't say, don't worry about the tithing.
Right.
Just focus on these things.
Yep.
He said these you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Right? We gotta have the whole pattern of Christianity, not just the organization of the church or the acts of worship or the terms of salvation. We got to have the whole pattern, not just pieces of it.
Let me tell you what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a body of people who love Jesus so much that they protect their marriages because they realize my marriage is the lost view of Christ and his bride.
Right.
There's no way I'm going to cheat on my bride. I'm not going to leave her. I'm not going to divorce her. So we've got this body who they honor marriage. They make it a priority. They train up their children. They want to be together to the point where the community is pointing at them going, man, there's something different about them. I'd like to check that. I want to be like that. There's something there. And I think for far too many years, rather than being that, that different light, the city on the hill, I think we basically said, you get baptized, you're there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, you're good, brother.
Right. Yeah. That's unfortunately that's the extent of our, I guess, standard of faithfulness. Are you at all the services? If you're at all the services, you're faithful. Well, not necessarily, right? So getting back to what we were talking about with the gender fluidity and things like that, the preferred pronouns and those things. How much of that, or is it entirely the logical conclusion of postmodernism?
I think it definitely is where it's going to, that's a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone from there is a God to you can't know there's a God to nowadays I'm God.
Right.
I mean, the current generation is so narcissistic that God has been excluded and they feel like they're their own God.
When I was younger, I never heard the term narcissism or narcissistic. I never heard it. It seems like in the past, I guess, maybe 15 years, you hear it all the time because it's prevalent. It's prevalent now. It seems like narcissism in people. And
a little bit about my age here, but if you go all the way back to the beginning of social media, one of the very first ones was a thing called MySpace.
Right. Yeah.
MySpace. I get my wall. I can put stuff up on it. It's all about me.
Right.
And social media has just kind of mushroomed from that.
So you think narcissism is I don't know, what would you call it? A side effect or a symptom or of social media, that it's a product of social media?
I think we've got in America, we built one of the most idolatrous nations around, and the idol is ourselves. Mm. And you look at the average 17, 18-year-old. I did a Barna poll thing where they were showing how many pictures, how many images on a phone the average 16, 17-year-old takes in a week. Mm. It was like in the thousands because they want to have just the right angle and just the right look.
Right.
Present, and I'm thinking,
have you heard about the phenomena? That's what they're calling it, a phenomena of people getting plastic surgery to look like their Instagram filters, where they make their, eyes bigger, lips fuller, cheeks pinker, and they're actually going and getting plastic surgery to look like their filtered picture on Instagram. It's amazing.
And you got to wonder, that sounds cool when you're 19. Mm. What is that going to be like when you're 40?
Yeah. That's
or when you're a grandfather and you've got big eyes, and it's like, do you
right.
really?
That's one of the things I've tried to tell my daughter, and she's good. She acts like she's not listening to me, but she is. So I've told her, there's some things that are fun or safe, if that's the right term, to experiment with, and then there's some things that will alter your life permanently forever, right?
Right.
You want to, get a piercing in the cartilage. Okay, you don't like it, take it out, let it close up, no big deal.
Yeah.
But you get a tattoo, that's permanent for the rest of your life. Or you alter your appearance in some permanent way. That's you can't undo that. So play with the makeup, have fun, get the look you like, and all that. But before you do something that is permanent, you need to be really, really sure that is, something that you really want, because it's permanent. That's the whole point, permanent.
I can tell you, having cut on over 600 dead people, tattoos don't look good on dead people.
I bet. So postmodernism, I guess the basis of postmodernism is that
You can't know truth.
my truth is my truth. And our truths can be totally contradictory, and they both still be true. So, and when I saw the trends toward the current gender fluidity type thing, and I've said it in some sermons, is that postmodernism has gotten young people and some not so young people to the point to where they don't even know if they're male or female. They're aimless. They have no direction, no foundation, no solidity. And we should be making a real effort to give them some foundation. They're hungry for it. They need it. And
Norm, if we don't get on this quick, we're going to have a generation of young men who are not leading their home the way God wanted them to.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Fulfilled the roles. Society has made masculinity a bad thing.
That's right.
Masculinity, etc. And I'm preaching and teaching just the opposite. God wants men to be men. He wants women to be women.
Right.
He doesn't want everybody to be this gray that's in the middle. And so I tell people, you better teach your young boys now to rise up and be a man.
Right.
Because otherwise, I already am frustrated. We've got a lot of young Christian men in their 20s who are sitting around playing video games.
Right.
I'm thinking, you need to be a Christian man.
Right.
Need
to be developing yourself into the type of man that a young lady can reverence, because that's what the Bible says, that she's supposed to have reverence for you. But if you're not somebody that she can reverence, then how can you expect to have a healthy marriage?
Exactly.
The way that God created it.
Yep.
Lenny asked a great question here, and this is something that I've read about before. And it's really interesting. It seems like I just heard somebody talking about it recently, how it may have been Jeff Rowe when he was on, talked about the shift in race relations before and after Darwin's evolutionary theory.
Yep.
And I think that goes to Lenny's question. I'd like to know Brother Brad's thoughts on how the perpetuation of evolution affects race relations.
I'll tell you what, Norm, I am going to ask you to give me the screen, if you will.
Yeah, you should have the option to do a screen share there on your settings tabs.
Let's see. Record. Let's see if it'll let me here. Bear with me 1 second while we figure this out. Share. Okay. I think I'm sharing. Tell me if you can see the slide there.
It hadn't come up on my end yet.
Let me get back out and look, see what's going on. Nope, it's not.
Do you see the screen share button there on your settings?
Go. Let's try this. How's that?
I'm not getting it. It's in your studio window there. You see below the live screen where you can see both of us and the comment. And there's the row of, say, you got on mine anyway, there's a microphone mute or unmute. There's a camera disable or enable. And then right next to that is a screen share.
Mine right now is saying screen share is not allowed. I don't know if it's, I wonder if that's a setting that from me or from you.
No, it should be. It should be on. It may be your browser.
Let me go to, try it one more time.
Or it may be a setting on your computer doesn't allow you to screen share.
Yeah, okay, we'll just talk about it then. Let me preface this by telling you, I believe very, very, very firmly there's only one race, and that's the human race.
Right.
I do believe God created different shades of that race, but I believe there's only one race, and in heaven, I think we'll see that. There's not gonna be a black section, a white section, a yellow section, a red section of heaven. There's gonna be heaven with his created beings in it. Skin color is caused by a biological pigment known as melanin. So everybody on the planet has melanocyte cells. The amount of melanin you've got in those cells is a direct result of your mom and your dad. And so right now your skin is pigmented according to your parents. Now there is a condition of albinoism where somebody who has got a mutation where they don't have any. But even, in that situation, it's this still applies. So if you think about it for just a moment, a lot of times, because our wonderful VBS material used to always have a blonde-haired Eve and
right,
blue-eyed Adam. If God had started out with two people who were basically mocha color, which most of the people in the Middle Eastern area today are.
Probably most people in the world, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you start and you put together what's called a Punnett square, it's actually, in fact, let me see if I can find it.
If you were to text that over to me on like Facebook Messenger or something, I could put it up on my screen.
Yeah, let me try that quick. Let's see. So, somebody who is a really, really dark skin is going to have genetics that is based on how much melanin. Well, if God had started out with two people who were mocha color, in science we call it heterozygous. Basically, what it means is you've got a little bit of both. And I'm pulling up my messenger here, so bear with me for just a second. In fact, let me see if I can throw a single slide at you, Norm. We'll try it that way, maybe. Yeah, here we go. Okay. No, it didn't do.
It didn't go.
It did, but I'll figure out a way. Well, tell you what, I'll just throw the whole thing at you. See if that works.
It's a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You're sending it in Facebook Messenger?
I was trying, but it's not. Oh wait, let's do it this way. It's not really wanting to. Let me try one last thing, and then if that doesn't work, we'll go to Plan B.
Okay. I think what Lenny's talking about is according to evolution, the lower on the, when you line up the, upright walking man back to the, sloop, crouched over walking on his knuckles monkey, the shade gets lighter and lighter and lighter toward white at the other end. And it's very, even in Darwin's writing, it was extremely racist in his theories. And has it is the evolutionary theory and the predominance of it, the fact that, you have to accept it. It's the only acceptable theory of origins in academia. Does that promote racism and perpetuate racism?
Absolutely, it does. And what's frustrating to me is evolution is a politically correct theory that has to be in all the textbooks, but at the same time, it's evolution that is actually teaching this idea of racism to our kids. Because what it's saying is there used to be this Neanderthal creature, lots of hair, longer arms, darker skin, who was on the earth so many millions of years ago. And then, lo and behold, white man came evolving out of Europe a couple 100,000 years ago, which any student, if they're astute at all, will tell you what you just said means white people are further evolved than dark-skinned people, which is exactly what he believed. That's what Darwin believed. Slide down to about okay, so yeah, right there. Let's jump on that one, and then we'll look at that one in the next one. So this is a Punnett square, and this is what geneticists use to predict offspring. And so in this particular example, you see at the top, big A, big A, big B, big B, then little a, little b, little b. Those would be the skin color genes of Adam and Eve, we'll say, just hypothetically. And so you take dads, you put them across the top. You take moms, you put them down the left-hand side. And in each one of those 16 boxes, you combine the parents' genes. And in this case, all 16 would be right down the middle tan, which obviously does not explain what we've got. But if you go to the next slide, so if he'd started with two people who had a mixture, who were heterozygous, then you can see just from that slide alone, you get everything from very, very fair skin all the way to very, very, very dark skin and everything in between. And that's just with two people. You can imagine what happens with when you get 8 people coming off of an ark and lots of
so children. If Adam and Eve were both this middle brown color, both with AABB and AABB, they could produce offspring across the full spectrum of skin tones.
Yes, and if you go to the next slide, it actually is an example of what we're talking about. So you've got, for instance, on the left-hand side, a blonde hair, what looks to be a blonde hair, quote unquote, white person who has a twin sister who's black hair, black skin, or brown skin. And the two infants that are being held in the picture, it's one of those things where we know scientifically it can happen. Right. And so lo and behold, you've got a situation where if God had started with a mixture, then yeah, we can explain all the different skin colors that are around us today.
Right. So with that understanding of and I don't I don't know about you. I particularly don't like race or saying that there's these different races or my race or your race or whatever. There's one race. There's and I prefer to use the term ethnicity. Right? There's different ethnicities
Right.
and different um, uh, geographical locations where people are predominantly a particular skin tone, but we're all one race, right? And so when you have uh, evolution and part of and it's certainly not in the textbooks in school, but as people get to the higher levels, graduate level, things like that, and they start going back and actually studying where the evolutionary theory came from, it's extremely racist. And I think Lenny makes a good point there. Evolution does promote uh, racism, whether it's outwardly acknowledged or not. It does promote racism.
And let me take it one step further. So you got Darwin in the 1800s, 1850s, who's promoting this idea. In one of his books, he actually comes out, I think it's the second book he wrote, called The Descent of Man, where he says that, and he uses the word Negro, people are closer to the simian stem of monkeys than white people. Mm-hmm. So he himself is saying, yeah, I think they are as evolved.
Right.
So you know,
right. Like I said, extremely racist.
But then fast forward roughly 100 years to when a guy named Hitler comes along and says, Darwin was right. We want to create the superior race. So we're going to extinguish genetic people who don't fit what we think is the superior race.
Right.
Hitler was actually acting out what Darwin was saying happens by nature, but he was doing it through his Nazi stormtroopers. And, both things. You got evolution that's promoting racism, and then you got guys like Hitler that are soaking it in, thinking about it, going, hey, yeah, that's right. Let's get rid of the inferior race.
Mm-hmm. Kind of going back to where we started out on intelligent design. What do you think it is? And I kind of have an idea. I don't know if we're in the same place or not, but what would you say is the number one reason that more and more in the scientific community are changing from evolutionist to intelligent design?
Complexity. I'll give you the easiest example. When Darwin was around, he thought the cell, a single cell, that was basically, it was full of jelly. Mm-hmm. Kind of the typical definition that he thought a cell was. So fast forward 100 years and we realize, wow, there's a nucleus in there.
Right.
Another decade, wow, there's ribosomes, there's mitochondria. Wow. And you keep fast forwarding and you go, wow, that's making proteins. It's got to have molecular motors to transport the proteins. Wow, it's got ion-gated channels on the bilipid membrane. And so you keep going to where even what was popular when I was in school now seems like old news. People realize that didn't happen. It's far more complex than just a nucleus with DNA and a couple of mitochondria. Mm-hmm. We know it is just crazy complex. So the further we go with complexity, the harder it gets for people to say, just happened by chance.
Right. So Stephen Meyer wrote a book called Signature in the Cell.
Yes.
And he talks about that, how the more you look in the cell, the more impossible evolution becomes. Yeah. And the signature in the cell is the DNA and the RNA and the interactivity between, like you said, complexity. It's it's and the title of the book, Signature in the Cell. It's, you know, God's signature in each and every cell of our body, saying
Yeah.
he put that there.
Well, that's how Anthony Flew was finally converted to believe in God, was because of the design argument. Anthony spent 80 years of his life as a devout atheist. He even debated one of our Christian brothers, Tom Warren,
Right.
on the existence of God. Finally, after 8 decades of saying, no, there is no God, he realizes, wait, there's too much evidence. This DNA thing right here is too complex. It's like a computer program. Who programmed it? Where'd the code come from? Who came up with the parts to the code? Had to be a God.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if we talked about this in much detail or not when we started out, but maybe give a little bit of an explanation as to the difference between intelligent design and special creation, right? We would refer to ourselves as creationists, right? Because we believe God created everything just the way the Bible lays it out, and that it happened just like that,
Yes.
As opposed to intelligent design.
Yeah, special creationists basically would say, you know, here is your theory, hypothesis, answer all in one.
Right.
6-day creation rested on the 7th, just like God prescribed it in the order God prescribed it. Intelligent designers, they basically would say, okay, we don't know about any of that, but we know that, for instance, the universe is too complex to be acting on its own. Something's holding it all together. We see design in the universe, and anytime you see design, by definition, that demands that there must be a designer.
Right.
And so they, you know, an intelligent designer may not be willing to say God created the heavens and the earth, and then along came plants, and then along came the moon, the stars, the sun. They may not put it in this kind of order.
Mm-hmm.
What they do is they say, wow, we see the moon, the star, the sun. We don't know what's holding that together. It's well designed. It's got to be a designer.
Mm-hmm. But they just don't identify who the designer is.
Correct.
They stop at saying it is purposeful design. We just don't know who the designer is.
What's interesting in some of their writings, depending on who you follow and who you know, some of them will actually capitalize D for designers. Some of them don't.
Right.
You kind of get a sense for who's already leaning in the direction that, yeah, there's a God. That's
right. Well, and the reason I like to point out that distinction is because it's not enough to say that we believe in intelligent design, because there's people that would agree that say, yeah, you're right, intelligent design is the more plausible explanation of origins, that would then say that the intelligent designer is a, you know, computer programmer that programmed this simulation that we're living out, a computer simulation, that our reality is a computer simulation. And there are actual intelligent design proponents that teach that. It's actually probably one of the more popular views amongst intelligent design. I would say that there's probably more intelligent design proponents that believe in creationism, but the computer model is another one that is pretty prevalent, I think. And it just goes to show, you know, even when you look at the evidence and you're honest with the evidence, anybody who's actually honest with the evidence is going to say it has to be designed. There has to be a designer. It has to be purposeful design.
I would encourage anybody that's listening, you know, if you're still skeptical, you're not sure, I would challenge you to open your high school, college biology book and go back and review how a simple protein is put together. How first got to copy the DNA using RNA, you've got transfer RNA taking it over, how it has to fold the correct way. All of that taking place inside of a cell at a microscopic level, and just spend, you know, 15, 20 minutes reviewing how is a simple protein made and then tell me that there's not design in that.
Right. Exactly. Uh, I have really enjoyed our conversation. We've got a lot of good comments from the live audience. Tanya, good to see you watching. Gwendolyn, always good to see you. Serena, good to see you. Eric, Mossy Man says, "God bless you all in Christ." Thank you, and you too. David says, "I'm no monkey's uncle for sure." Amen. Let's see. I think we looked at. Let's see. I'm very sure if I even try to say the name, I'll mispronounce it. Do you want to? Is that Oye Arnaiz?
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Courage in the Age of Cowardice, listening from Las Piñas City Church. Very good to have you here with us this evening.
Absolutely.
Mossy Man says one of Biden's secretaries is a transgender. Yeah, not just one of his secretaries. The what is it? Public Health Secretary?
Secretary of Health, which I'm like,
Secretary of Health, right? So I wonder if we're going to be getting any good treatments for what's the clinical term for it? Dysmorphia or gender dysmorphia? Is that the clinical term for it?
I don't think we're going to be hearing a whole lot about.
No.
Yeah.
Gail, good to see you watching. And Lenny agreed that evolution is extremely racist. Yep. So that's why we're not evolutionists, among many other reasons.
Absolutely.
Because anything that devalues certain people and places a higher value on other people, and that was a great point you made about Hitler basing his what's the, I can't think of the term now. People are wanting to do it now.
What?
Say it again.
Making the superior race with genocide, where they're killing off people who don't fit their mold.
Right. There's a term for, trying to manipulate the genes to genetic engineering, or and that's not the term. I do this all the time. I lose these terms, but when you believe that evolution is the origin of life, then you're not going to come to the right conclusions about hardly anything. No. I've asked other people this, and I'll ask you this, kind of a closing question, I guess. How much further along do you think we might possibly be in all of the sciences if we started from a correct premise? If you start your investigation from a false premise, you're going to come to false conclusions.
Right.
So, in just about any area of science, if people started out from the viewpoint that we are created, there is purposeful design, how much further along scientifically might we be?
So I'm gonna hold up a page in this science textbook, and then I'm gonna read just some of their names, see if they sound familiar. You got Sir Isaac Newton, Johann Kepler, Blaise Pascal, Samuel B. Morse, Robert Boyle, James Clerk Maxwell. All of these guys did phenomenal science. I mean, most of what I just read you, these are actually the guys who founded the fields that they're in. Astronomy,
right.
All these different fields. All of them believed in God.
Right.
Believed the Bible. The problem is the fields that they founded have been hijacked now. And, it troubles me because I think we would be a whole lot further along in every aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I know right now the big thing is, I got to get a vaccination, COVID, yada, yada, yada. Okay. There's a difference in coming at things from a perspective of there's a God and he created the body, and now we live in a fallen world and we got to figure this out according to him, versus I am my own God and I'm going to do this, and hopefully it's going to work, and oh, by the way, it may have a list of consequences this long that we have to read at the end of a commercial.
Right.
But there's a big difference.
Right. Yeah. I've thought about that a lot. If we approached medicine, if we approached genetics, if we, approached all these different things from the viewpoint of a created design, that everything about this organism has a reason. There's a reason that it's there. There's no such thing as vestigial organs or, go ahead.
I said, which deep down they know that now.
Right.
Everything has some kind of a function.
Right. Yeah. But tonsils used to be a vestigial organ. Now they're a known part of the endocrine system. Right.
Absolutely. And it's immune system. They know, but it's so much easier just to recycle the old arguments, which is what they keep doing.
So it's immune system. So I said it right the first time when I said it, immune system. And then I thought, well, maybe I should have said endocrine system. So it's immune system. Same thing with the appendix too, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So they don't cut them out near as quick now as they used to.
No, honestly, if they were in the area, they'd go ahead and take it out.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, even say you're having, they're looking for colon cancer. They'll go ahead and take your appendix out too.
Mm.
So
yeah, they don't do that anymore, though, do they?
Not anymore.
Yeah, because now they know it's not a vestigial organ. Well, it's really interesting. I know that our viewers would love to have you back and to continue talking about some of these things. When the textbook comes out, make time for us to come back and review that textbook with us.
All right, let's do it. That sounds great.
All right.
I would love.
Thank you so much for being with us, Brad. Be sure you check out focuspress.org.
Absolutely.
I've been visiting Focus Press for a long time. Always find great articles there. Think Magazine, a lot of good books and DVDs. Are y'all doing streaming on your website? Or
we are, and if they aren't subscribed to Think, tell them they need to get on board quick.
Yeah, get a subscription for Think. Absolutely. Thanks for
invitation on. Look forward to it next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here, Brad.
Thank you.
All right. We will not have Bible Q&A next week. And when we return, I will have another great special guest to share with you. Thanks for being with us.